Welcome back to the Boomtown Podcast. I'm Cameron Walker, your host, broker and owner of Cameron Walker Realty. Today, as always, I have Megan Hines, my agent extraordinaire, and we're really joined by a special guest today. I've been super excited about this. It's Brandon Lecoq out of Colorado Springs. And today, we're really excited. We're going to address some of those concerns people that may be moving to Huntsville from Colorado have. Brandon's an expert listing agent in that area, so his expertise is going to be phenomenal for those people trying to make that move. So we're going to dive into it. How are you doing today, Brandon?
I'm doing good. Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to hop on this, and I think being able to talk about something that's coming up real soon. So this is good stuff.
Awesome. Megan, you doing well today?
I am doing great. I'm excited for this.
Well, cool. Well, want to kind of just lay out a little bit of ground rules, or a little forethought into what we're going to do. We're going to talk a little bit about the Colorado market, talk some about the Huntsville market, and then talk about how to make that transition so that it's seamless and streamlined for people that maybe have never done it before, or maybe it's their 100th move, right, or their 100th PCS. So, but there's always something to learn. There's always tricks, and especially when you're moving to Alabama, there's a lot of differences here between moving elsewhere. So we want to make sure we tackle those too. So, Brandon, I'm going to kick it off to you a little bit first. Kind of give us an update, particularly on the listing landscape for home sellers on what's going on there in Colorado Springs.
Yeah, absolutely. So the listing landscape is, I think, probably very similar across the nation right now. It's a very challenging market. There's a lot more inventory coming on. There's, buyers are a little hesitant, fearful of the economy. There's a lot of factors that obviously play into that. So specifically within the Colorado Springs market, for those that live here, you're familiar with the area, and we have 5 military bases. Within, you throw a rock and you can hit 2 of them, right? So there's a lot of turnover. So there were PCS cycles and things like that. So with the increased inventory, houses are sitting on the market a lot longer. So depending on your area, like Colorado Springs in general, I think we're looking at close to 50 days on average, days on market, which is, a little nerve wracking because, there's a few weeks potential lead up to get your home listed if you're doing it right. And then, there's 50 days on market before your home sells like that. Or goes under contract. So that can be a little nerve wracking for, specifically military folks looking to get, out of the Springs area. I think what's important is making sure that you're approaching your listing appropriately. So we can talk a little bit more about that. But in terms of the layout, we're looking at about 50 days on market. Houses are sitting. So it's challenging for sellers right now.
For sure. And we see very similar here. We're 50 to 60 days on market right now. Megan and I, while we primarily focus on relocating home buyers, we do assist some local sellers as well. And we're seeing exactly what you're talking about. Homes are sitting a little longer. If we went back 10 years, this is what we would call a balanced market, right?
Yeah,
It's just
exactly.
because we're coming on the heels of, COVID era, just rapid expansion in real estate that people feel like houses are sitting for so long. Like a 60-day listing was totally common before all this, right? So I do think it's a little bit of resetting of expectations for some people, particularly in our market when we're listing. And I imagine it's very similar because we have very similar profiles with military, retired military, ex-military, and active duty. So you did touch on a couple of things. I want to touch on some of those facets because while, you have to get in the nitty gritty with an individual on selling their homes, there are some things that are kind of uniform. So one of the things you mentioned was that kind of like 2-week run up to listing. So how early should somebody get you involved in the process, and what are they going to do in that lead up?
Yeah, so I love this answer and I hate it at the same time. It depends, right?
Sure.
So if there's scenarios like, hey, we got orders today and we're leaving next month, that 2-week may be condensed down to 3 days,
Sure.
getting potential staging pictures, get it on the market and going. With that being said, if we're doing it properly, I think a 2-week lead up is key for a few different reasons. One, I like to walk the property, make sure I see everything, any upgrades, any improvements, so we can refine their CMA, their market analysis, right? But also identify what they may or may not need to fix, repair, to improve the property, to really put their best foot forward for getting the most buyers on day one to see their property.
Yeah.
I think ultimately our goal as agents is, obviously there's a lot of, once we get under contract, there's a lot going on, but leading up to that, there's a lot of important things, in presenting and marketing the home. So I like to go in and make sure, hey, what does the landscaping look like? Are there any paint touch-ups that we can do? The little things like that don't cost a ton. Right now, if it's, a home that needs, like quote unquote fix and flip, that needs a lot of work, that's a whole different conversation. But
Sure.
traditionally, military clients, they don't have a ton of work they need to necessarily put into the home. But there's a lot of home maintenance that people neglect, and I think everyone is in that scenario in some cases. So the touch-up paint and the landscaping, and then from there looking into, hey, do we need a stage? Are you going to be living in the home? If we can get it vacant, that is absolutely the goal, but that's probably not the case with most military clients. So I will have a staging consultant come in with me. We're going to identify how to rearrange what they already have, and we're going to declutter, depersonalize, all those common things that we're looking at. So that way, when we take professional pictures and drone pictures and videos and things like that, that the home is in its best presentation. And then from there, once we get the pictures and videos and marketing materials, we go live. And then there's print materials and there's email marketing. There's a lot of different things that unfold, but having a good marketing strategy, every single client should have a different marketing strategy. And that's what I do for every one of my clients. I make sure that they are set up for success, because not every marketing strategy or asset is going to work for that particular home. So, billboards and Facebook ads, and there's a lot of different things we can talk to. But once the house is up and running, the first thing we want to do, make sure, is also get a mega open house, get a lot of traction through the door. And then from there, really just testing the market and seeing where we're at. And we need to adjust price if need be, but very quickly. So there's a lot of, managing expectations, like you mentioned earlier, that we need to, we have that initial conversation when we walk through. Ideally, about 2 weeks, I can make it happen. A week, we can absolutely make it happen, but there's a lot more things that are good, potentially neglected early on. So, that's got the gist of it. Obviously, there's a lot of nuance and details there.
Have you spoken to anybody who's actually planning on moving to Huntsville yet? Have you been getting those calls?
So no, because so let me back up. I did talk. I have a good friend of mine. They are officers in the Space Force, and they're saying that there's a delay. They haven't identified who's going to be leaving yet, and it's going to be a smaller fraction than we think it will be. And it's somewhat what I anticipated in the conversation we had early on of, hey, it's probably going to be higher level officers that need to get there early to start to get things running. There's probably going to be a lot of, other players getting the HQ set up that may or may not take a big portion of the personnel from where we're at here. Just because the HQ is moving doesn't mean that the Space Force is leaving the Springs. We're still going to have the Space Force here. So right now I think it's minimal, but I think what we're doing now is, getting people prepared for what's happening, whether it's December, whether it's next spring, PCS season, or next summer. They're not identified in a mass group yet. So,
yeah, we are actually already starting to see some Space Command people come. So I actually have somebody coming in 3 weeks, and he's actually already referring other people to me from Space Command. Nice. One of our other agents that works with us, his wife works for Space Command. She's been here for 2 years. And I think that's part of that back end that a lot of people don't realize is already there. Huntsville has so many space and missile defense related capacities here, whether they be government organizations or the contractors and subcontractors that service them. There's already been a lot of overlap there. So, which is, when we go back into, and I don't want to get into all the details of how this was settled, but that was what initially brought around that conversation to even look at it, right? So there is a lot of overlap there. So there will be additional people moving here in support of this organization that may not be coming from Colorado Springs.
Yep.
And so one of the things I see in the news cycle is Colorado Springs is like, oh, we're not losing that many people. And Huntsville's like, we're gaining all these people. And people are, everybody can do math. And they're like, wait, Huntsville says 1,500. Colorado Springs says 400. Where's the 1,000, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's what people are overlooking. The other part of it is, and I'm going to let Megan speak to this in just a moment because I know she's running into it already. We have people that have moved up their timeline to move here. We have a lot of inventory and houses, like we said, 50 to 60 days in the market in most cases. But the people that could make a move soon, whether they're investors, they're people that had their move was at their discretion, or now, like I said, some of these Space Command folks that maybe can speed up their orders, we're already starting to see them. We're showing them houses and getting under contract. So Megan, can you talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. That's 100% what's going on. We have, what we do is we'll be talking to just a bunch of people about real estate for months and months before we actually do a transaction with them. And a lot of those people are reaching out and being like, should I move up? I'm seeing something I like. I'd like to come out. So we've all got, everyone in our brokerage has appointments lined up that just came in the last week from people who are thinking
for the masses too, right?
Yeah. People who are thinking they need to get ahead of what's going on. The other thing, and this, I think Brandon was talking about how it's going to be the higher ups are coming here first. That makes sense in terms of what I'm seeing on social media from other agents, which is that we're seeing a lot of movement at the bottom and more close to the top. And the middle of the market is staying pretty much the same because we have, the higher ups coming, and then we have people at the bottom wanting to invest.
Yeah. I think something important to point out too, being prior military, being in, the intelligence community and things like that, even though we were getting orders to go places, maybe last minute or maybe in advance, there was a lot of back end moving pieces that were happening before we started to move. So we're already seeing that back end stuff started at a little bit of turmoil, for lack of better terms. And then I do think that it's going to pick up to where people are going to start getting moved specifically for HQ, because you already said it, they're moving out there, not necessarily because of HQ but because they are already going there for a position, because it's already a well-known location for Space Command. So I think there are some nuances there, and people trying to figure out how this is playing out. I think the ones that are moving early are smart if they can. The ones that are starting to educate themselves early on is key. So that way you have a pulse on what's going on and how quickly things are moving as well. So, yeah.
And I think we're getting calls from people who are ancillary, people who work for places like Blue Origin or Lockheed Martin. I believe, I don't have any insight into exactly what they're doing, but it does seem like
a lot of contract positions for sure
are preparing by reaching out to some people, and we're getting calls about that.
Yeah. Just a couple of months ago, we closed on a house with a gentleman that was repatriating in order to support Space Command, and the announcement hadn't come out yet. So it's kind of like, okay, there's the canary in the coal mine if there ever was one. But I think for people moving here, there's kind of three things to keep in mind. There's the general Huntsville market. What's the sentiment here? Where, what school district do you want to be in? What kind of commute do you want? What's your price range? What can you get for your money here? There's the process part of it, right? And that's the part that's tricky for a lot of people, whether it's their 10th move or their first, getting kids out of school in one, getting into another, getting doctor's appointments lined up, all that, getting your driver's license changed over, whatever, right? And then there's the selling the house. If they're renting where you're at, great, they can probably get out of that lease or wait it out or whatever. But if they got to sell a home, and then it's like that becomes part of that process and part of that finding the next place. It's like, what do people do if their house is on the market for 50 days before they get an offer? So now let's say they close in 30 or 45 days, but they had a report here in 60. And this is where Megan and I really specialize in, because we focus so heavily on relocation here. Those are the things we tackle, but it's really important for us that we have good communication with the listing agent on the other side. And I'll give an example real quick before I kick it back over to you. I had a lady moved here a few years ago. I'd put her in touch with a listing agent in Utah where she was moving from. At the time, that market was hot, even though interest rates had gone up. So our plan was to put her in short-term housing here while she came down, find a house once her house there went under contract. However, the contract she got was a 2-week cash close, no contingencies, and the people put the entire balance for closing in escrow. So we knew they were buying that house as much
Serious
as we
buyers.
could. Right. So instead of our original plan, she found a home online. She really wanted me to check it out. Went and took video to her. She absolutely loved it. We were fortunate that our market was a little slower down here by that point due to the interest rates. So we were able to get a great offer where she had 48 hours to fly down, tour the home herself before she was committed to it, which is atypical for our market. So we were able to do that. And she wound up not spending a day in transit other than getting her items down here, right? She didn't have to spend a night in a hotel because we were able to make that happen so quickly. But it was because we had that confidence level on the other side of what was going on. Now, the inverse is true too. If it's going to be a while, if it's a contingent offer on that end, we have to play it a little more slowly on this end, a little more conservatively, right? And that's really where our expertise, our experience comes into play, in knowing how our market functions and how to best serve the client and what their risk tolerance is, right? I have people that have no qualms carrying 2 mortgages, and I have people that absolutely won't even look at a house until the day after they've closed on the first one. And our job is to facilitate that, not to make the decision for them. So all that said, deep breath, how does that play out on your side, right? Where you've got somebody who needs to list their home, you're working with a buyer agent, be it us or somebody else on the other side. How do you communicate both with the client and the other agent, like the stages of listing, the offer letter, the offers you're receiving, the interest, things like that?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And I think that's one of the pieces that get people a little nervous, a little stressed out, a little like, I'm not sure what to do. And I think, but like you mentioned that, hey, you focus on relocations. Same here. I deal with a lot of military folks that are buying and selling at the same time. They're in Japan, they're moving here, they're in Belgium, wherever the case may be, or they're here, they need to move to Belgium or international, national, whatever it may be. So the experience and understanding the PCS is like understanding with, are they Army? So their PCS might change a little. There might have different nuances there. But when we're working with clients who need to buy and sell at the same time, or that is a huge factor with communicating on the other side, and really ultimately connecting with quality agents for referrals. Like, there's a lot of times you'll see agents say, hey, I've got a great referral for you, and they haven't done their due diligence to make sure their clients are in good hands. And that's what, Kevin and Megan are amazing on the other side. I have trust that they're going to be able to take care of that side. So I need to focus on what's important for this client, knowing that they're well taken care of on the other side. So how I do that is a few different ways. One, obviously, depending on what their situation is, we can, speed up things or slow them down as needed. But the cool part is I do have different, tools in the tool shed for people to buy or sell, or buy before they sell. Different, financing options that we offer at the company I work with to be able to do those different scenarios. So if they need to get out of the house and they need to, put it on the market, then they can do that. There's options for them. It just really depends on their scenario, how fast they need to move. But we're, between the three of us, like I think we're really well equipped to be able to navigate that. If I'm going to communicate, say, hey, they just got an offer. It's a quick turnaround. Are you guys able to get them into housing there if they move out quickly? And that's the conversation that's had on the back end that a lot of times the clients don't even hear. We're just like, here's your solution at the end of the day, because that's what we try to pride ourselves with. Excuse me, is being problem solvers. So,
For sure.
Yeah.
So Megan, this is actually something you've run into several times recently. I knew you were going there too.
I know.
So,
yeah, excited. We all get excited about this stuff too, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, speaking to that, I mean, what we're doing is finding people housing. They need a place to live and stay. And this has happened multiple times recently where we've had to source temporary housing for people because, it doesn't always make sense. You can't always, staying in a hotel for a month is prohibitively expensive. People have families. So we have been doing that effectively, and we've done it multiple times. We've talked to a couple big companies that do this, and they almost always have it's a lot more expensive than what we can find when we just sit down with our phone and the internet and just source it. And just, you get proactive, you call people who have Airbnbs, you ask if they're willing to do it, and you will find people who are willing to do this. And shout out, if you're watching this and you're willing to do this, please reach out to us.
Absolutely. So I'll kind of go into a little bit more granular detail there. Megan kind of undersold her services. So Megan's really well connected with a lot of the temporary housing folks, be it somebody that needs just day to day because we need a week between them closing on one house and the next one, or if it's somebody that needs week to week or month to month, whether it needs to be furnished or unfurnished, more of an Airbnb style, or we do have a corporate relocation partner. They are more expensive, but what they offer is more white glove, and it's more unique. If you've got a family of 6 and you need a mansion to live in for 3 months while your new construction finishes up, they're more that, or maybe your bill's covered by part of your relocation package. Again, so we have more granularity, we have more levels of service there, depending on what the need of the actual person is. And Megan's a phenomenal resource. And then there's some of this stuff we can do at scale, right? Some of these are larger companies. It's really go in, fill in some boxes on their website, get their options back. More often than not, though, it's a one-to-one. And that's where those connections with the local Airbnb owners, the local real estate agents, many agents in Huntsville actually own their own Airbnb. So we can reach out to them directly and be like, hey, I know you're advertising this on a month-to-month, but what if we needed it for a week? I know you say no pets, but what if this person has a really well-trained dog? They're willing to give a pet deposit. Those are those conversations you can't have with the website, right? It's just, they're so black and white on the website. Whereas when we call somebody, we can have that individual connection, maybe somebody we've already worked with, or they're aware of our reputation working with relocation clients. A lot of agents watch our channel, just bluntly. So those kind of things really come into play. And that's really something, when I get somebody to ask me, like, I almost always hand them over to Megan because she does such a good job with those situations.
Yeah,
that's huge.
We got to have people in a place to live.
I know, right?
So I think that a big pain point for people, or not, I would say pain point, it's something very different, is our disclosures that we have here. And so they're going to be coming from Colorado Springs, where they've had to basically provide a really elaborate disclosure, and they're going to be receiving a disclosure that's basically, most of the time, they won't get one. Because so can you talk to us a little bit about what they'll be doing in terms of their disclosure with you, and then we'll talk about what they're going to receive here.
Yeah, so if they've already purchased a home here in the area, they're very familiar with a lot of the disclosures that they had to endure. So a lot of the contracts, I would say, for Colorado, they support the buyer. So the buyer has a ton of opportunities to back out and get their earnest money back. They got the loan deadline, inspection deadline, appraisal deadline. So Colorado's contracts are very, very thorough, and we have a lot of disclosure. So, we in the state, we disclose anything that's adverse materials or material defects and things like that are known by the seller. So the seller will identify anything that's known to them. And if they do not disclose something that is a material defect that they can get there's a lot of legal repercussions that can come into play there. So with that being said, a lot of people understand that, and there's a lot that is disclosed, sometimes more than necessary. Like, that window, little lock, we, replaced it 5 years ago. It's like, thank you, appreciate that. So when you get ready to leave, you're in this mindset of everything is disclosed. You're going to be well taken care of. You're protected, everything like that. And I know we had this conversation. It's a whole different conversation when you get to Alabama, which I'll let you cover that. But in Colorado, we have a ton of disclosures. We have the radon. We have obviously nationwide is lead-based paint. We have a seller's property disclosure that is several pages long. There's something for everything about the house in the actual disclosure. And then, if there's anything that comes up during the transaction, we update our disclosure and resend the disclosure out. So there's a lot of due diligence there.
So on our end, Alabama is a buyer beware state, and they take that to the nth degree and extreme. So there's only 3 instances where a seller is required to disclose here. It's something that's health and safety related. They're a realtor selling a property with defects they're aware of, or if we ask directly about a defect. So a lot of that is on the honor system. Obviously, we're not going to leave our buyers up to an honor system process, right? So for us, inspection's key. The first walkthrough is our first chance to see anything surface level defects. I mean, when I walk through a house, I run the sinks, check for leaks, flush the toilets, everything I can do visually without being intrusive. Then we'll ask the listing agent questions about the home. They are duty bound to give us honest answers. We do it electronically, either through email or text, so that we have a written copy of what happened. We are asking things like age of subsystems, how old's the roof, how old's the HVAC, when were those installed, when were they last serviced, things like that, particularly if there's any question to it, right? Because there's not really an easy way to get out of an Alabama contract. Our earnest money does one of 3 things. You go to closing, it's used towards your down payment, your closing cost are refunded to you if it's in excess. If you and the seller agree to part ways and cancel the contract, there's a document we call the mutual release. And in that mutual release, it dictates how much money goes to which party. So it could all go to the buyer, it could all go to the seller, it could be split, but it's agreed upon. The third option is it goes to court. And a lot of times that court cost is more than what the earnest money was to begin with. So for us, it is definitely a measure twice, cut once situation. Now, there are things in our contract that do protect the buyer. I don't want to make it sound like it's the Wild West. We have radon tests, we have inspections, we have, and even in this inspection, things like health and safety, structural integrity, major subsystems like HVAC, electrical, plumbing. All of those things are protected at our inspections, but we do have to make sure they're included. Those can be waived, and you never want to waive those in a purchase, right? So we do have these protections in place, but only if we select to use them. And I feel like doing a little preamble to that is even as important, so that we don't get ourselves into a situation where, an example I'll give is one time I sold a house and the hot water heater looked like it was about to rust out, right? We obviously wanted the seller to replace that or give us a credit towards it. And the seller's agent is like, well, it's making hot water, it's doing its job. So then a lot of times it comes down to leverage. Right now, the buyers have more leverage in this market, so we can get a lot of those things taken care of. In 2020, that would have been a lot harder. So we like to pull on that lever when we have the leverage.
Yeah, and one thing too, the difference between Colorado and Huntsville, well, actually, let me back up. Now the VA has mandated all states will do a termite inspection for any VA purchases, right? So in Colorado, we're like, that's a waste of money. We have termites, don't get me wrong, but it's not like I have yet to see a case of termites in a home in Colorado. And so they're very rare. But obviously, if you get towards, Woodland Park or further towards the mountains, that, there's probably more cases there. But when we were talking, you're saying, hey, this is actually something that can have an impact on your purchase. So I don't know if you talk a little bit about that process, the difference there as well.
Yeah. Megan, you want to take that one away?
Yeah. So I've seen termites twice in the last week.
Last week, yeah.
That's not normal, actually. I've not always seen, but I've just had 2 houses very recently that I saw with termites in them. So one of them, I had a client go under contract, cash purchase. We had added an extra addendum, which basically said that should they find anything that they find to be a major defect, then they could get out of the contract. Because we added that, we were able to just basically request the earnest spending back and say, this house has termites. This is a deal breaker for my client. And we've moved on. She's already under contract for another house. Had we not, we would have been required to basically request that they mediate the situation. And my client didn't want to deal with termites ever. And if you mediate it, you probably would have to keep, this is an ongoing problem. It's not like something you can snap your fingers and have it be gone. Also, finding out exactly the extent of the damage was really challenging in this particular instance, because they had an addition built on the house with a crawl space that wasn't accessible. So that meant that we would have just had a mess on our hands had they refused to do this for us, had that addendum not been in there. So that's the kind of thing that we have to do, because according to our contract, in most cases, you have to request that the seller fix it. You find the problem, then you have to request it be mediated, unless it's, something that can't be mediated. It's health and safety. So that's why we have to pay special attention and really kind of find out where our clients' deal breakers are and have that taken care of ahead of time.
Yeah. So we have a detailed relocation consultation on the front end, right? So we do get an understanding of what are hot button issues for our clients. And then there's general ones, right, too, where nobody wants termites. You have to have that request on anybody on their list of criteria. So with older homes here, you're more likely to run into those kind of situations. Newer homes here really get out in front of it. They have a termite mitigation system built in, and we do termite bonds. So if you bought a brand new home today, that builder, almost every single one of them, is going to give you a 1-year termite bond. The termite bond means the termite company treats for termites, inspects for them probably 3 to 4 times a year. If they find them, and if there's any damage to your home, the termite company pays for that damage. Their bonds are up to $1 million. So that's always more than enough to cover any kind of termite damage. Now, obviously, they're treating, the likelihood of you having termites is very low. Really, most home buyers and most homeowners want to continue that bond year over year. It costs about $400 to $500, but it's an insurance against termites, right? Then when you sell, you can then transfer that bond over to the buyer and they can run with it. And that is something you will see actively advertised in our listings, particularly on the agent note sides that don't show up in Zillow. But that's a big selling point, because the next buyer comes in with confidence, knowing that it's already been treated for termites, and if somehow there's some undiscovered damage, that it's going to be covered. So that's a big selling point for us. We always recommend our sellers, if they don't have a termite bond, they get one prior to listing. So that this is a solved problem. It's typically on the older homes where people don't have these bonds, like in this situation where we run into that problem. And because we're aware of that, we get out in front of it and we write in those kind of clauses like Megan did to protect our clients. And that's true of anything here that's going to fall under those buyer beware situations. So long as you're aware, you get out in front of it, you can write in protections to yourself in the contract. It's just you need people knowledgeable and that care enough to actually do so. One concern I think I would have if I were moving here from Colorado, right, is it does seem like it's fairly easy for buyers to get out of a contract there, and it's more difficult to get out of a contract here. So it seems like they have a little bit more risk on if they're selling a home on the Colorado side and they've already gone under contract here. So when you're buying a home in Colorado, when is that kind of drop dead date for a buyer to walk away? Like what date do they need to pass through?
So there's 2 important, I'd say, dates that once you get past those dates, then you're quote unquote smooth sailing. I say that, and then you got to knock on wood somewhere, right? But typically, and let me just explain the process, how it goes here. So in Colorado, you are interested in a home, you submit an offer, and in that offer, there's a ton of dates and deadlines, including your earnest money deposit, inspection, appraisal, et cetera. So the first thing that happens is once the contract's fully executed from all parties, is you connect with title. We're a title-based state, and you submit your earnest money deposit. So that's typically about 1% of the purchase price. And that's your good faith deposit. Similar outcomes for you guys. We do have mediation, which is a big difference here before we go to court. And the next step is scheduling an inspection. I always encourage, when I receive offers when I'm on the listing side, I try to bring in the inspection as soon as possible. So that way, if there are any issues that are going to be deal breakers for my client, I want to make sure that they are able to get out quickly, right? So if the buyer's coming in asking for a ton of things and we're not able to do it, or the money's not there, we don't want to wait 3 weeks in or 2 weeks in to do the inspection to figure that out. Now, the second biggest date and deadline that we have to wait, especially if it's a VA loan or something like that, is the appraisal. So Once the inspection's gone through, a lot of the negotiation between the clients are pretty much over with until the appraisal comes in. Now, if the appraisal comes in at or above, purchase price, then everyone's good. Now, if it becomes below, and obviously the VA it's called a tidewater, then we have to renegotiate, and you can either both part ways. You can either person can bring money to the table, the seller can drop the price, or the buyer can bring their money to the table to make up that difference. That's usually something we don't want to get into, and we always ask for a reappraisal if that becomes the case.
Yeah.
And having the seller or the listing agent making sure that we did our comps correctly initially. I don't just run random comps and here you go, here's a potential list price.
Sure.
Because I am in the business of taking that listing, getting it sold. And if there's some reason there's an issue with the appraisal, I have my documentation, my appraisal packet ready to go for that appraiser to make sure, hey, no, this is why we priced it the way it is and why we're under contract at this price. So all those little factors matter. So there's the two big things is the inspection and then appraisal dates and deadlines, usually within the first 2 weeks. I'd say those are pretty solid. And after that, we're just coordinating with title. We're making sure the lending side is correct. And then, we get our clear to close, hopefully, a week or a few days prior to closing, and then we're all set. So I'd say if we're communicating back and forth between us, like, hey, Cameron, Megan, we got past the inspection. That's a huge hurdle. That's moving in the right direction. I'd say you're about 75% of the way there. Get past the appraisal, you get to about 85%. And everything from that between the appraisal and the closing date is anything can happen in real estate, right? We've seen it, but you're pretty good, pretty set.
Yeah, that last 15% are the unknown unknowns that we can't predict. So again, we just make our offers either contingent upon that sale closing or some other way to mitigate the risk. So it sounds like 2 to 3 weeks into getting under contract there is about when we would probably start looking at a home here, in particular if we're waiting for your side to close before we go under contract on this side.
I'd say 2 weeks max. I think if we get past the inspection, the lender orders their appraisal, and then you guys start looking, right?
Okay.
That's usually the rule of thumb. And now if we're in a situation where we have to move quickly, we bring in the inspection very fast. We order the appraisal no matter what, and then you guys keep looking, and then we try to negotiate the best of our abilities for that inspection to make sure.
Sure.
And then something to think about too, when we have the inspection, that's also an education piece for the sellers to understanding what buyers are potentially asking for. So did you get your sewer inspected? Because that's a big ticket item, right? So if you want to get ahead, it's going to get inspected. It's going to get inspected no matter what. Well, I advise my clients to do that. If they don't, then so be it. Yeah. But maybe they get an inspection prior to getting their home listed and make sure your sewer's good in inspection. So they have a holistic approach of, okay, we're probably going to get these questions. We can disclose this information now. That way, when we get to the initial contract, we already have a lot of this stuff answered. So that is an option as well. If we're dealing with someone who's relocating, hey, let's get a pre-inspection before we, get the home listed. So
yeah. Cool. Yeah, absolutely. Megan, you got anything you want to throw in there?
I love a pre-inspection. I think it's so much easier for a buyer to choose a house, especially here where it is buyer beware. And once you're locked in, it's very hard to get out of that contract. If you can see that inspection, and you're choosing between like two houses, the one with the inspection just wins every time.
Yeah.
The counter argument is the seller's like, I don't want to know.
Right? Yeah. No,
Right.
and you can. I mean,
there's a
balance
there for sure.
Like if you discover something, then you're responsible for it. That's the counter offer. I mean, they might not find it, but I mean, the thing is, do we want to just pretend we don't see things?
Yeah, exactly. Like, if you're trying to hide something, don't tell me, because I have to disclose it. That's my obligation, my fiduciary to my clients. But I'm always in the business of trying to gauge that conversation right out the gates. Hey, are you aware of anything in this house? Like, and you're going to get that real answer right away. And that's something that I tell people, like, hey, this, we have to disclose it. Like, it's the only one, it's the right thing to do. Making sure, would you want someone not to disclose something that's like no material defect you moving in? So it's all about that initial conversation and, treating people like humans and making sure that they understand what their left and right limits are and things like that. So, yeah.
Sure. And we're on the trust but verify system down here. We're going to ask those listing agents those same things, get them in writing, and then, make sure our inspectors verify that information if we can't visually verify it ourselves. So for us on this end, so, kind of asked about on your end, when would we feel like we have a little bit of the free and clear on our side to start the purchase? So I would say 70% of our clients find their house in the first 2 days. We have plenty of inventory in the market, currently over 5,000 homes. So there's plenty to select from. Usually day one's exploratory. You see things on Zillow, they look great. We get there in person and it's all photoshopped and the layout's not right. The backyard slopes like a ski slope, right? And
Those photographers.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, they're wizards, which, euphemism for liars. So day one is usually exploratory. That evening we go back, look in the MLS, and now we have so much better idea of what the client's really looking for. We've seen it through their eyes, walking through these homes together. We generally find the house on day 2 if we didn't find it on day 1. So I'd say that's 70% of buyers. There's another 20% that it may take 3 to 5 more days for them to go under contract. Generally, we still found that house in the first 3 days. We might have waited to make an offer because we wanted to look at some other stuff, or maybe we were waiting on something on the sell side, for where they're moving from to get an update there, or maybe we were negotiating prior to going under contract. So I would say truly realistically 90% of our clients are under contract within the first 5 to 6 days of them wheels down in Huntsville. The other 10%, they're just looking for something unique. It's not on the market, or there's only one and there's 4 buyers bidding for it, and we're not trying to get into a bidding war where we ever pay for something, or it's just really unique. And those are the folks that we really have to help get into a situation where they're in short-term housing. They're not paying nosebleed prices for it, but they also have the opportunity to step out of it to buy something. You don't want to go into a year-long lease and find the right house in 2 months unless you have the opportunity to break that year-long lease, right? So we have to tailor that this side of it to each individual person, particularly in that kind of 10% category. Our contracts are generally 30 days to closing, particularly if it's a resale home or it's an inventory new construction home. And we do have a ton of new construction here, and it runs anywhere from 250,000 to $1 million plus, right? And in every range in between. And I'd say there's 3 rings here. You have a central ring that's really Madison, city limits of Huntsville, because those surround the major job centers of Redstone Arsenal, Research Park, downtown Huntsville, and the medical district. And those are going to be generally more pricey. You have a shorter commute. You have more amenities in the community nearby, more shopping, dining, entertainment. Out from that is kind of the close-in suburbs. These are your Harvest, Meridianville, Owens Crossroads, a lot of demand in those areas. And then you kind of have the exurbs and then cities, sister cities. So you have like New Hope, Tony, Hazel Green. But you also have Athens and Decatur. And those areas are going to be a little higher priced because they have their own economies, they have their own cities. It's just there's a lot of people that commute in from there. Versus like Tony, Hazel Green, New Hope, like you can still buy rural property out there. Whereas these closer in suburbs, what used to be rural is now part of the suburb. 20 years ago, it was you and the cows. Now it's you and your neighbors.
Yeah, and the cows. There's
I can still see corn from my house. So yeah.
No, that's huge. And I think the one last topic, because I know we're creeping up on our end time here, but the cool part about that, I think a lot of people may or not understand or know, is that Colorado Springs and Huntsville are somewhat very similar because there's a lot of outdoor enthusiasts in both locations. There's a ton of fishing, there's a ton of hunting, there's a ton of hiking. There's a lot. Obviously, the dynamic of the environment is very different. We've got a really big mountain here, and I know we talked about this, Megan. You're like, they call it a mountain, but it's really a hill. So like when you get there, it's a little different. But I think it's cool to know that when you've gotten used to a certain community and lifestyle, that you can really copy and paste that into Huntsville, which is cool because I grew up in the South, and some people talk about the South like we're like 2 centuries behind. I'm like, look, we have a ton of stuff in the South, and a ton of activities, and there's the downtown is active and things like that. So shout out to you guys for really putting, Huntsville on the map and showing what you have. So if you guys are listening to this, go follow Boomtown Podcast, follow the YouTube page. You're going to get a lot of value, a lot of information of what you can and can't do in the area. So thank you for this. This has been awesome.
Thank you. And you're absolutely right. Huntsville is genuinely outdoorsy. Like this is a funny thing. There's so much Frisbee golf here. Is there Frisbee golf in Colorado Springs?
Yeah,
it's like
there's a huge veteran group here that actually does does their Frisbee golf all the time, and it's not my thing.
I've never seen so many Frisbee golf courses in my life.
So,
it's like at every park.
Yeah, I love it.
Huntsville has 10 months of the year amazing weather. We have really mild winters. We have hot summers. So if you like hot, we do have that. But for most people, they want a more mild temperature. It makes year-round golf, year-round Frisbee golf, year-round hiking, year-round fishing, hunting during any season, right? It just makes all those things so easily available. And I wrote a blog post and an article a couple of months ago, and it was how you can go out and get a 30-minute hike or bike ride, like mountain bike ride in on your lunch break from the arsenal. Like you can badge out, go do this, badge back in, and you've only taken an hour to an hour and 15-minute lunch. And so there's very few places that have that. Like we have over 200 miles of hiking, biking, and running trails within the city limits of Huntsville. And then we have more surrounding the area. So, and because our population's not that high, we're technically the highest population in the state of Alabama, but it's because Huntsville's annexed the entire north half of the state practically now. So we really look at that central population there. It's ridiculous. You can cross all of Huntsville in 10 to 15 minutes virtually any time of day. So getting off Arsenal, going to go do something like, no, you're going to have backups at the Arsenal gates in the morning like you do at any military installations or checking people in. But going out for a lunch break to go do that, super simple, easy, and really anybody in Huntsville has that opportunity.
So don't sell your mountain bikes. That's
exactly.
Don't do that.
Great mountain bike folks. So hey man, I know, like you said, we're pushing up against the time frame. So we really appreciate you coming on, doing this, giving us the lowdown on what's going there, letting our clients and future clients know about kind of what that listing price process would look like, time frame, what the expectations are. So how can people get in touch with you if they're watching this?
Yeah, so if they're watching this, my handle for Instagram is there at Brandon Lecoq. I got a unique last name, LECOCQ. And then honestly, what I take pride in is like, hey, just Google my name. I'm going to pop up and you're going to be able to find my contact information. Try to do that with 10 agents and see how many of those have their contact in there. I take pride in that. So you can look me up that way. Whether I have newsletters here, if people are interested, we have, a ton of cool stuff going on. So yeah, absolutely reach out. And I encourage you guys to, if you're listening, watching this, to just ask questions. There's no stupid question. Comment, we'll get it answered, whether it's on my end or their end. Like, I think it's important to ask those questions because if you have it, someone else has it. So. Yep.
Absolutely. Like periodically we do a question and answer session. So for us, if you're watching this on one of Brandon's channels, we're active on pretty much any social media you can name. Cameron Walker Realty is how you find us. We've got our Google business profile, our contact information, our website, CameronWalkerRealty.com. But most people, I would say, find us through our YouTube channel, where we've been making videos for 4 years about moving to the Huntsville area, things you wouldn't expect or know, and how to mitigate risk in that. So that's a great way if you want to learn a little bit more about us before you reach out. That's a great way to do it.